All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Today is the Essential Services Commission's public forum on our draft decision for North East Water. My name is Gerard Brody, and I'm the chairperson of the Essential Services Commission. Please just be aware at the outset that we are recording the session today, and we've got people online joining as well, just to ensure access for those that are unable to attend. So any statements, comments, questions you want to make will be included in the recording, and we will plan to make that available on our website. So to start the forum, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we are gathering on today, and those of anyone that's joining online as well. I would like to pay respects to elders past and present. It is the elders that hold the songlines, the stories, the traditions and hopes of First Nations Australia. I'd like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that may be joining us today. So thank you for taking the time to come along to our forum this afternoon. First, I'd just like to make some introductions. Firstly, from the Commission, I'm also joined by Rebecca Billings, who is our sponsoring Commissioner for Water. All good. As well as Chris Hutchins, who's the Project Manager for this price determination in our Water Price Monitoring and Regulation branch. We've also got Marcus Crudden, who is our Executive Director for Price Monitoring and Regulation, and a number of other staff from the Commission here as well. From North East Water, I would like to welcome Joe Murdoch, Managing Director of North East Water, Nicholas Moore, who's General Manager of Corporate Strategy and Performance, and all other members of the North East Water here today, as well as members of the Board of North East Water and Stephen Brown as Chair. So welcome. I would like to also just thank all the people who have come along today to making the time to join us. So before we jump into the agenda, just some quick housekeeping. So yeah, as I mentioned at the outset, a reminder that the public forum is being recorded. This means that, yeah, any statement or comment or question you make will be included in the recording. And for those participants that are joining online, any question you ask using the Q&A chat function, and we'll encourage you to use that later on, will be read out along with your name and be included in the recording as well. If you do have questions or comments while some of the speakers are talking, that's fine. Please type them into the Q&A chat so we can build these into the conversation. And for those online, please do keep your microphone muted when not speaking to avoid that feedback and background sound. You can also use that raise your hand function as well. Okay. In addition to this forum, and we'll be listening very intently to feedback that is provided, you can also provide written feedback via the Engage Victoria website. And please do let us know if there is another preferred option for how we can engage with you. We're always open to feedback to make that process as simple as possible. I think the web address for Engage Victoria is on this current slide and some other slides in the presentation as well. So I will use the first part of today's forum to give a brief introduction to the Essential Services Commission's role, including in price regulation. But as I mentioned, the main purpose this afternoon is to hear from you and community members and answer any questions you may have about our draft decision for North East Water. So to help shape today's decision, we'll cover how we assess the price submission from North East Water, as well as our draft decision. We'll also then ask North East Water to speak and have the opportunity to respond to our draft decision, and then we'll open it up to hear from you in a Q&A session. That will be convened by Commissioner Billings. We really do appreciate having the opportunity to have an open and honest conversation today. And so we encourage engagement, and we will also be as upfront as we can throughout the process. Insights from these sorts of engagements are really important and help shape our regulatory decisions. So this slide just is a bit of an overview about our role. So we regulate the Essential Services Commission of Victoria's energy, water and transport sectors, local government rate caps, and the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program. We have been regulating prices for water in Victoria for more than 20 years. For the water sector, we approve prices. Also, we approve service standards. We monitor and report on performance, and we administer customer service codes. So we are currently reviewing new water and sewage prices to apply from the 1st July 2026 for North East Water, and we're also engaged in a concurrent review for Melbourne Water for their price review. So the prices that we approve and we've put out there as a draft decision to date reflect an assessment of the efficient costs water businesses need to recover those valued services to customers. Following consultation, we will issue a determination that sets the maximum prices North East Water charge customers for the next 5 years. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Chris to take us through in a bit more detail about how we assessed the price submission from North East Water and our draft decision. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Jared. Good, is it afternoon or evening? When does evening officially start? Thank you everyone for coming along today. I'm very mindful the entire board is here tonight. I'll run through how we assess a price submission and then what our actual assessment of North East Water's proposal was in our draft decision and what we've asked North East Water to respond to by Friday. So responses are due in this Friday. Okay, so I've got a whole bunch of notes here. So I've got the slide and I've got my notes. All right, so the price assessment process is conducted under a fairly rigid legal framework. So the Water Industry Regulatory Order, or WIRO, which is made under the Water Industry Act, sets out the requirements for the ESC to conduct and set conduct price reviews and set prices. One of the things we need to do under that is to issue guidance on how the price review will be conducted and what information is required in the price submission. So we put that guidance out to North East Water last year, and we assess the submission against our PREMO framework, which basically assesses the ambition in a price submission in terms of customer value, and there's a rating system for the PREMO rating. The framework comes under the Water Industry Act and the Essential Services Commission Act. Okay, so North East Water is responsible for putting in a price submission that meets all the requirements that we set out in our guidance reflecting the WIRO and other relevant legislation. So our process is to assess that. We put out a draft decision first so that sets out our preliminary views, and it's an opportunity for North East Water and also other interested customers or interested parties to respond and provide further information if necessary before we make our final decision and binding price determination. So a price review is quite an extensive process. So the guidance paper we released in November last year after several months working with Nicholas and the team to make sure that they understood all the requirements that were in that. Price submission was lodged with us on the 1st of October last year. We've been busy assessing. We had a public consultation window open for a couple of months once that was released, and we put out our draft decision on the 2nd of April. So we now have another public consultation window open. As I said, just before it closes this Friday, so it's been a 4-week window. And then we'll very quickly prepare a final decision taking into consideration responses from North East Water and any other submissions we receive. Our final decision will be released in June, and the prices that are set in the determination will come into effect from 1st of July this year for a 5-year period. So most of you in the room are from North East Water, so you'll know you're coming off the back of an 8-year regulatory period, which is quite unique. And this time around going for a 5-year period. Okay, so when we get a price submission, it's very long. I think it was a couple hundred pages there, submission and attachment. Our guidance is very comprehensive. The guidance we gave North East Water had 113 pages. So there's a lot of information to cover. So a lot of parts for us to look at in our assessment. So we look at how North East Water's engaged with customers and how it's used the feedback from that engagement to inform its proposals. We test the expenditure and demand forecasts that the proposal's been built on, verify supporting assumptions and data provided by the business. We'll also ask for additional information as required to help inform that assessment view. We look at how North East Water is managing risk, and from a pricing point of view, the risk we're looking at is the risk that customers don't pay more than they need to, rather than safety, health, environmental risk. So the business needs to put forward a proposal that gives enough revenue to meet all its regulatory obligations, customer expectations, etc., and balance the risk. It's easy just to keep asking for more and more money to cover more and more requirements, but there's a balance point. We also look at North East Water's performance over the current 8-year period. So the P of Primo is about performance. It's a backward look. And that also informs the forward look, the forecast, which we're assessing. The main component making up the revenue requirement of the business, the prices recover, is the operating and capital expenditure forecast. So we put a lot of work into looking at those. We do engage a independent expert consultant to help us work through all of that. Okay, so this is our draft decision on a page. So after all the assessment and verification work, we put out our draft decision. And most of what North East Water put forward has been accepted. So it was the assessment team, we found it was a really well presented price submission. Nick and the team were very quick responding to any requests for additional information we had. And we found we were able to move towards a decision point very quickly. The tariff structures for water and sewerage, we've accepted. They meet the requirements set out in our guidance. There was strong support from customers, and it does move the balance between fixed and variable in the tariffs from variable back to fixed a little bit. I think that's correcting an evolution that's happened across this 8-year period. Again, there was strong support for that from customers, and it does provide a better outcome for tenants and large households and small businesses. The North East Water is rolling around the same guaranteed service level scheme, but adding a new GSL this year. Strong support for that from customers, and we're comfortable with that. Some of the mechanics of a price proposal, the form of price control. North East Water is going with a price cap, which means we approve the maximum prices they can charge, and that's set for the 5-year period. North East Water can always charge below the price cap, but they can't exceed it. It means the business carries the demand side risk if sales are higher or lower than forecast. The demand forecasts we were comfortable with. They made sense. Northeast Water did its own work. A lot of growth localised, but throughout the region. So they had a good sense of where that growth was going to be, the number of connections added onto their system across the period. Also, the outcomes under Primo, the O stands for outcomes. So there's a focus on what customers get, not what they pay, but what they get. So the value received from the business. Northeast Water did a nice job setting up its outcomes. That also has each year, for each outcome, there's a number of measures to demonstrate that it's been delivered or achieved with a measure and a target for each year. So that process has all been done very well. The capital expenditure forecasts, congratulations to Northeast Water. It's a really well presented capital expenditure plan. Speak a little bit more about expenditure in the next few slides. But we did, so we accepted the capital expenditure proposal in full as proposed. But with the operating expenditure, there's a small adjustment we've recommended in our draft decision. So the total revenue requirement is just under 500 million, and that's about 16 million or 3% lower than what Northeast Water proposed, according to our draft decision. And I'll talk a little bit more about where we made those adjustments. The draft decision didn't accept Northeast Water's proposed new customer contribution charge. A new customer contribution is an amount that a new customer connecting to the system pays up front as a contribution to that capital investment. So Northeast Water's proposal there, there's a lot of criteria to meet and some pricing principles set out in our guidance. At the end of our assessment, we weren't satisfied that that had been set in accordance with all the criteria in our guidance. So the main areas that we've flagged, we couldn't verify that the growth costs had been appropriately allocated. So that's the part of the capital plan funding growth infrastructure, how that had been allocated back into the NCC, New Customer Contributions model. It wasn't clear to us how, it also proposed a single NCC charge across the whole region, a uniform charge. It wasn't clear to us how that was cost reflective across the whole region, especially when most of the investment that was being recovered was from a couple of large centres, Wodonga, Wangaratta, and some other towns. So the other area that we weren't clear on was how existing customers, especially large industrial customers, were making their fair share contribution towards those investments. So I've got another slide later on, we'll go with this again, but we've asked Northeast Water to have another look at the NCC structure and come back to us, and we know they've been working hard on that. We also just have asked Northeast Water to have a look and give us a bit more information about the average asset life. So the capital investments recovered over the life of the asset, and we thought the average asset life in the modelling was a little lower than most other businesses, and we've just asked for a bit more information to support that. What that means is that the investments recovered quicker, so prices are higher in the short term. But again, a very well presented price submission, a lot of work put in by the Northeast Water team, and from our point of view, it was pretty straightforward to work through and assess. One key outcome from the decision is that Northeast Water's proposed price increases, apart from the small adjustment to the operating expenditure, we've effectively accepting the need for those. Been well justified in the submission. Okay, this is setting out the typical bills for North East Water customers, and I'll point out here, this is from data provided in North East Water's submission itself. This doesn't reflect any adjustments we've made in our draft decision. The 25-26 column, the blue figures there, that's the current typical bill, and that's calculated based on the average volume, which you can see in the left column. And that varies for different customer types. Under the North East Water's original submission, the price path for owner-occupier residential customers was about 5.5% per annum increase before inflation. So the way we assess and set our determination, we set a price path in real terms, which means we don't try and guess what inflation will be, but each year, once inflation is known, we then add that onto the price path. So for owner-occupiers, 5.5%. For tenants, it'll be about 2.1% per annum price rise there. And they've just got small, medium and large typical non-residential customers there for comparison. So the actual prices and typical bills will be updated for our final decision. It depends how North East Water responds to our draft decision and whether we make any subsequent changes in the final decision. But at that point, when we release our determination, that will have that price path set, and it will also have this year's inflation added, so it'll be the actual price. All right, expenditure is, as I said before, it's a key component of the revenue requirement for a water business. You can see there North East Water's operating expenditure and capital expenditure proposals fairly close, a little bit above, a little bit below $300 million across the 5-year period. I said we accepted the capital expenditure proposal as proposed, so there's no change there. Operating expenditure under our draft decision, we've lowered that by $17 million, which I think was, 5.6%. So the reason, the OPEX adjustment, when we assess expenditure, we're required to verify the prudency and efficiency of the proposal. Now, prudency is basically the business needs to demonstrate it needs to be expended and it needs to be expended now. That's the case for doing it. The efficiency is the proposed solution, is it cost effective? So our role as regulators is to ensure that the prudency and efficiency can be verified by supporting information provided by the business, and that it's appropriate for those costs to be passed on to customers through the pricing. Our adjustment reflects the fact that we considered some of the forecast wasn't reflecting prudent and efficient expenditure. And I'll talk about OPEX in a sec. When we approve expenditure, the ESC is not approving individual cost items or capital investments. What we approve is, we call it our benchmarks. So there's an operating expenditure benchmark, a capital expenditure benchmark. This says to the business, based on the information you've provided us in your price submission, which is a snapshot point in time, for the next 5 years, we believe this is about the right amount of expenditure to set the revenue through your prices. So making an adjustment doesn't mean we've removed expenditure for particular items. It might look that way, but our approach is to make sure that we don't think expenditure is being counted twice. And some of the adjustments we made was we felt that it was already covered in the other allowances. Right. So this is the operating expenditure proposal. The blue lines are the current period. So the light blue line is the benchmark operating expenditure allowance that was approved at our 2018 price review. Fairly steady. The dark blue line on top is what North East Water's actually spent across the 8 years of the period, with their updated forecast for this year, 25-26. You can see things were tracking along pretty well in the first few years, and then it started to deviate quite significantly. The price submission says a lot of that is post-pandemic cost changes, and we saw that across all businesses in our 2023 price reviews, but also a significant shift in growth patterns for this region. So a lot more growth, a lot more operating costs than forecast. It's steadied out, and the red circle represents where we are now, and that's about 7.3 million per year above that benchmark, which is about 16%, which is a fairly big increase. So we looked really closely at that, but what we found was that North East Water's justification for that increase was really robust, and we've accepted that in full. We made no adjustments to that. So the dotted green line is basically carrying that reset baseline forward. Now, the solid green line on top is additional expenditure that the business has asked for new cost items. So the adjustments that we've made are to that green line. So the total $17 million over the period. It totals 21 million over the period for 13 additional cost items. We thought there was quite a lot of additional things to ask for, especially for a business that there's a growth factor built in. So each year, 1.46, I think it was, % cost increase, reflecting their customer growth rate. But North East Water's proposal said they would absorb growth costs by matching that growth rate with their efficiency rate, which is why the dotted line is flat. So our view is for a business that is saying it's going to absorb its growth costs, some of those additional costs above the dotted line we thought were growth-driven costs. So our view was that they're already covered in the growth allowance. We also thought some of the costs weren't clearly demonstrated to be new and were therefore included in the dotted line in the base. We also, for business, because the proposal was to absorb all those growth costs and have a high efficiency improvement rate, that some of those 13 items were quite small. So we thought from a materiality point of view, an efficient business should be able to absorb those small changes within its growth and efficiency allowance. So all up, there was about $15 million of that 21 additional that was removed in our draft decision. And North East Water will no doubt respond to that on Friday. Thanks, Oscar. The capital expenditure. Now, this is an interesting story. Again, for the first few years, the dark blues tracked against the benchmark quite well. Once again, the changes that came about in 2021, significant investment change for North East Water, and you can see that the dark blue line starts to deviate significantly. Now, because North East Water did an 8-year regulatory period, one of the conditions of taking the longer period was to do a mid-period review. So in 2021, North East Water did its own review on whether it would continue on the 8 years or step off and join all the other businesses on a 5-year cycle and do a price submission for 2023. It was a robust review and everything was looking good, but at that review, the team did flag to us that there were more costs coming on. So we're well aware that this was going to be unfolding. And you can see at the moment, quite a big increase. And cumulatively, across the period, the benchmark for capital that we'd set was $180 million. The actual expenditure is 380. So more than double what was built into prices at the 2018 price review. Because of that big uplift, our expenditure consultants looked very closely at the expenditure incurred across the current period, and they found that that to be prudent and efficient. So all of that additional expenditure has been accepted and will roll into the asset base now, and that will then flow through into prices from this year's reset. So then we looked at the forecast expenditure, the green lines, and you can see the green line is well above the light blue line. So 8 years ago, when North East Water was wondering what would be happening now, you can see it's quite a different story. I mentioned before a very robust capital expenditure proposal. North East Water had invested significantly in preparing a long-term master plan for its regional needs. And the report from our expenditure consultant was that made it really easy for them to reconcile the proposed expenditure or investment now against the long-term plan. So we commend North East Water on that approach. I think Joe's going to speak to the sector in a couple of weeks about how effective that's been for the business. So well done. So on the back of that, our consultant basically accepted the forecast, and we're very comfortable with the capital forecast that's been proposed. So our draft decision makes no changes to the capital. From a deliverability point of view, we think because the last 2 years been sort of a peak of investment, the forecast is lower than that. So there's no, well, the business has proved that it can deliver that kind of scale of capital program. So that's CapEx. All right, under our Primo framework, a business self-rates, either standard, advanced or leading, across the 5 elements of Primo. And then we form our own view, and if it aligns with the business, all's well. If we think the business hasn't demonstrated it's up to the rating it's given itself, the Commission can propose a lower rating on any individual element. We accepted all 5 elements, the self-rating from North East Water, so performance, risk and management were all rated as standard, while engagement and outcomes were advanced. It shows a strong approach to customer engagement and delivering customer value. The engagement program from North East Water was really robust, very inclusive, provided customers with a high level of influence, and that was clearly demonstrated through the information provided to us by the business. The outcome commitments for the next regulatory period were developed with customers through their customer, I don't know what you call that one, but a customer advisory panel of some sort. And that refines and revised up and improved on this current period's set of measures and outcomes. We're happy with that. The expenditure, apart from the small adjustment to operating expenditure we've made, we consider it as well presented, prudent and efficient. So North East Water also flagged in its submission that there's about $37 million of uncertain expenditure that hasn't put in the forecast. So we talked earlier about the risk. This is where the business carries the risk. That expenditure is incurred, the business will fund it, but then seek to recover those costs at the next price review. It also doubled the customer financial support. So acknowledging a significant price rise, there's more support for customers who may find it difficult to meet those increases. So overall, we accepted and agreed with North East Water's self-rating of standard for Primo. So just to sum up our draft decision, so under the proposal, costs have gone up a lot and prices will follow. So there will be price rises in real terms for most customers and inflation to come. The final prices will depend how the business responds to our draft decision and any other information we might receive through submissions. North East Water will have about $280 million for ongoing investment in infrastructure to support regional growth, continue to deliver on its environmental, cultural, economic outcomes made to its customers. What we've asked North East Water to respond to is the new customer contribution items. I've got a slide on that to follow, and just as I said before, a bit more information on the average asset life for its capital asset base. So with the NCCs, we know that North East Water engaged heavily with developers. We know it tested a number of different approaches and landed on the uniform charge across the whole region. But because the things I said before that we had concerns about, not being able to clearly demonstrate how it met all our pricing principles, we've asked North East Water to review that growth cost allocation into its NCCs, ensure that the new customer contributions are cost reflective. We're moving towards cost reflectivity and to show strong evidence of support by developers, but also not just developers, but its other customer base as well. And I'm sure in a minute, Joe's going to talk about how that work's coming along. I think that's it from me. So I'll hand over to Joe to run through North East Water's response.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, and thank you to the ESC for hosting this public forum and for the commissioners and senior staff of the ESC for being here in person, and some are online as well for this important meeting. On behalf of North East Water, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting today and thank them for their care of country, and particularly the lands, sky and waterways of North East Victoria. We also pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today in this meeting, working at North East Water and living in our region. I'd also like to mention that in the audience we have, and I know Chris mentioned this, but the chair of North East Water, Stephen Brown. So thanks, Stephen, for being here. And board directors Jennifer Fraser, Catherine Goss, John Green, Leanne Mulcahy, Alison Genevieve, Victoria Schmidt, and Angela Verde, as well as members of our executive and senior leadership team, all demonstrating our commitment to this very important process. So thank you. And sitting next to me at the table is Nicholas Moore, General Manager, Corporate Strategy and Performance, who will be co-presenting today as well. But most importantly, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our customers and community who are here with us this evening. It's an absolutely fabulous turnout, both online and in person. Just giving up your time to contribute to this process. Thank you, and we look forward to your contributions. Now, I'd like to provide some information about North East Water and some context today for our price submission, because I think it's very important. We heard a lot from Chris, but what is the context behind the price submission? So our Strategy 2040 vision, our vision in our strategy 2040 is healthy environment, thriving communities and a prosperous region. And this was developed with customers and key stakeholders 3 years ago as a foundation for this price submission. And while this is our vision, we never ever forget our purpose, which is to deliver safe, sustainable water and wastewater solutions for our communities. And this is what we do each and every day, delivering services to over 121,000 people, almost 5,000 businesses and across 39 towns and a 20,000 square kilometre footprint traversing 7 local government municipalities. And it's great to see some of our local government representatives at this meeting today. So thank you. Now, to be able to service this very large region, we have a lot of infrastructure, 22 water treatment plants and 21 wastewater treatment plants, all of which we maintain and upgrade. And because we're here today to talk about prices going forward, I wanted to reassure our customers and community that for the last decade, North East Water has had the lowest or second lowest average residential water bills in Victoria. This year, our average annual bill is around $220 less than the typical Victorian regional average bill. It's also $500 below the national average bill for large water corporations. Our challenge, however, is that our region is growing, our climate is changing, and technology is rapidly advancing. We need to invest at least $1 billion over the next 10 to 15 years to upgrade and expand critical infrastructure across our region. It's urgently needed to ensure reliable water and wastewater services that can support population growth and meet increased standards for health, environmental protection, and cybersecurity. It is also needed to help us plan and adapt to the impacts, the very real impacts that we're seeing of climate change. Now, to address these challenges, we are being proactive and solutions focused. In addition to transforming our business to build the skills and capability we need to meet these challenges, we have completed master plans for our growing towns and cities, showing what infrastructure is needed by when. And this work actually informed the significant capital investments proposed in our price submission, which is a strong step forward towards proactively addressing these challenges of growth and compliance. A lack of investment now would slow housing development, it would impact the environment and reduce service reliability and ultimately lead to higher bills later on. Now, that's some of the context behind the price submission. You can read more about these challenges and what we've done to respond to those in our price submission on our website. And I encourage you to do that. So North East Water is committed to involving customers in the decisions that affect them. And this was one of the very big, our big decisions that we engaged heavily. So over the past 3 years, we actively engaged with customers, community and key stakeholders, including with traditional owners, local government, customer support agencies, developers, businesses, and more to help shape this submission. We had workshops and forums. We had pop-up marquees in 17 towns across the region, surveys, interviews, community webinars, and really a fabulous independent facilitated deliberative forum with over 25 community participants. And I look around the room and there's actually a couple of members of the deliberative forum here. I want to say thank you very much for coming tonight. We heard through our engagement that our customers are concerned about housing shortages, cost of living and caring for the environment. They told us they value services that are reliable, responsive, sustainable, locally focused and fairly priced. And they expect us to minimise our environmental footprint and our impact on the environment, plan and deliver for both current and future generations, ensure that infrastructure investment benefits communities across both large cities and small towns. There's also strong support for developers contributing their fair share to the cost of growth. Importantly, our customers also experience strong support for initiatives that assist those customers that are experiencing financial hardship. And this engagement highlighted the need to invest significantly in critical infrastructure while also keeping bills fair and continuing to support our most vulnerable customers. And balancing these priorities was central to our submission. Now, I'd like to thank the ESC for their draft determination, and we were very happy that the majority of what was in our price submission has been supported in this draft determination, and in particular, support for our 5 customer outcomes, which are at the very heart of our price submission. And sitting beneath each of these outcomes are commitments, measures of success, and targets, and they are in our price submission, but I do have a few examples at the very end of our presentation. We're also very pleased that the draft determination supported 100% of our capital program, and so that we can respond to growth and compliance for the future. This will provide capacity in our systems for an estimated 9,000 new house connections and an estimated 500 jobs in construction across the Northeast. We thank the ESC for generally supporting price increases and acknowledging that North East Water has justified the expenditure increases behind its price rises as necessary to support regional growth and deliver its customers' expectations. And we're very pleased to see support for increasing our customer support fund to $400,000 a year to provide bill relief to more than 1,000 customers experiencing financial difficulty every year, and to help thousands more apply their concessions to their water bills, which are very important. It's also fabulous to see that the proposed tariff rebalancing is supported, because this will reduce the impact of the price increase and better support tenants, large households and small businesses, as Chris mentioned, but it also, importantly, still encourages water conservation in a drying climate. With regards to the Primo rating, it was great to hear that now, Chris, but highlights for us were that the ESC acknowledged our past performance. That is our operational and our capital expenditure over the last 8 years as prudent and efficient. Particularly important because a lot has happened in that 8 years. We experienced COVID, we experienced 3 years of La Nina wet weather, and we experienced 2 bushfire summers, all of which had significant impact on our business. And there are lots of other key points, and I put some of those on the screen here today that we welcome support for in the draft determination. Now, as Chris said, while the majority of our price submission was supported, there were some areas identified by the ESC as requiring further justification, and we acknowledge these and we're providing that information. We have been doing a lot of work to look at what additional information is required. In terms of the new customer contributions, we engaged Marsden Jacobs to independently review our modelling. And we also engaged, again, with 15 different developers to share revised modelling and talk through options. And I just want to take a moment to thank the developer community for working constructively with us towards an outcome. We're all here because we all want the same thing, and that's to see an outcome that benefits the communities of our region now and into the future. And I'm confident that we'll be able to come to an outcome that we satisfy and supported by our communities. We've also been relooking at the business cases for operational step changes not yet supported. Some of these are known cost increases that we simply cannot absorb. Some of those step changes are critical roles that we will need in the business to meet, for example, growing health, environmental, cyber or procurement compliance obligations. As mentioned, though, we do appreciate that the ESC does need further information from us, which we will provide to justify the criticality of these roles to our business and ultimately to our customers. I'll now hand over to Nick Moore, who's going to take us through the 3 key elements of our price submission that have not yet been accepted and where our focus will be. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe, and thanks everyone for turning up tonight. It's been a pretty back and forth process with the EC over the 18 months, and from my perspective, I can't wait to 1 July rolls around. That'll be great, and we can have a bit of a spell. But yeah, it's been good working with ESC. We've got a pretty strong relationship with ESC, and we try to be as transparent as possible. But what I'm here to do is just briefly talk about the three key issues. So, from a developer perspective, developer contributions perspective, it's not straightforward in Northeast Victoria, where we have particularly large capital costs and relatively small new connections, particularly based on a town perspective. What we proposed in our submission was a uniform wastewater NCC, unable to generate a water NCC just due to the way our tariffs are structured, and percentage of water that we're getting is more than the operating costs and the capital based on our water investments. So what we proposed in our submission was $4,017, which was a wastewater uniform NCC, and that was based on the net cash flow model, which is the ESC's preferred model. Previously, we engaged with developers in June 2025 on an alternate model that was undertaken in a 23 price period, known as the AIC method, and that produced a uniform NCC of around $7,279. We about September or late August, we transferred to the ESC's model and redid that work in accordance with the NCF. That also included location-based charges over a 20-year period. So we modelled that for our major centres, so Wodonga, Yarrawonga, Benalla, Wangaratta, and also a location-based charge for Tangam, Langa, where there's relatively significant capital investment costs for a relatively small population, and that produced a reasonably large NCC, which I'll talk about in the next slide. Probably the key one for us was that the ESC didn't accept our incremental capital, growth-related capital that we include in our new customer contribution model. It can be quite complex from the perspective whether you've got multiple drivers for a particular investment. Like a look at our West Wodonga upgrade, which is $80 million in Wodonga. It has a number of drivers, so it has a growth driver, an emissions driver, and also a compliance factor in there. So it becomes a level of judgment that you need, particularly internally from your engineers, in order to be able to allocate your percentage of costs across those investments to include in the model, when the model is just looking for that growth component. So the ESC did not accept in that format our growth-related capital costs. So we had an independent review undertaken by Mars and Jacobs to look at that. And that resulted in a reduction of around about $194 million worth of capital incremental costs in our net cash flow model, which is about 28% of our total capital. And we also removed what they call sunk costs. So sunk costs are those investments that have occurred in the current period that have got a growth element of included in them that would then carry forward to future customers. So we remove those to remove complexity around reviewing those as well. There's a couple other minor things just in relation to modelling. We try to do a couple of funky things in our modelling around post-tax nominal discount factors and real discount factors, and do a present value calculation. It's going to be technical, but in relation to each year, so we pull that back to the EC model as a net present value calculation over 20 years. And what we'll also provide to the EC will be a supporting paper to address the key matters raised in their response. In relation to the outcome, we engaged with developers, 15 developers last week, 22nd and 23rd of April, to share the updated NCC modelling following the release of the draft determination, and including our review of our incremental capital expenditure. 3 alternative models were presented, including location-based and standard charges. So we looked at our location-based charges again and our standard charges. We have 1 standard charge and 2 standard charges. So the 1 standard in relation to the 2 standard charges, one was based on our major centres, and which was around 85% of our total new customers over the 20-year period. And that produced an NCC of around $8,000. And then we looked at our remaining 15%, which is based around our approximately 20 small towns, which came out around bit over $600 So presenting the location-based charges, they vary from around $21,000 at Tangam to $17,000 in Wodonga and $0 for Benoa and Yarrawonga. Which sort of clearly demonstrates the variability that we have in relation to the impact of large capital costs influencing a small number of new connections each year. So there was overwhelming support for a single standard uniform charge, so relatively consistent with what we engaged with our developers in June 2025, which was around 7,200. So that came in at 7,600. But what we also included is a small scale development. So typically 1 to 3 new lots on a typical house lot. That's really looking at trying to provide some equity and fairness to some of those small sort of type mum and dad investors. So we're proposing that $613, which we didn't have initially. Just in relation to the specific developer feedback from last week, I'll probably just read from this, but the preference for standard or dual standard options. Most participants indicated support for either the standard uniform option 2 or dual standard option 3. NCCs, citing concerns that location-based charges would create market disruptions, discourage investment and harm small towns. The second one is around concerns around volatility and equity. Several stakeholders highlighted the risk of the large price swings for small towns under location-based or dual standard models and emphasised the importance of a stable, equitable approach that does not disadvantage certain customers. And the third point was around development and housing affordability. Participants discussed how NCCs could deter development in growth areas, undermine affordable housing goals and potentially shift investment to other regions, with some noting that small towns face broader challenges beyond NCC pricing. So we'll respond in relation to that with an information paper and updated modelling as part of our submission. The regulatory asset base was another one that the ESC looked at. So our average asset life is a little bit lower, probably comparatively lower than 29.5 years compared to some of the out-of-water corporations, which, when we did sort of look at those calculations, around 40 years. The way we've looked at that, we haven't proposed to change our opening asset base and our 3 price periods, where we've just continued on with our straight line depreciation for 8 years. However, what we have committed to do is look at our price PS4, so our current period expenditure on our current projects, and look at those useful lives as part of that process, which we've got at around 36 years. If you have a look at the graph there, the big slice of the pie there, which I think is around 37%, that relates to primarily wastewater investment, and that's driven primarily by our West Wodonga wastewater upgrade project, which is sitting in that category. We've looked at our weighted average useful average life of each category, and that's sitting around 55 years. The other thing that's influencing our lower average asset life is that we've got significant spend in the corporate category, which is based on assets lives of around average of around 11 years, some of those 5 to 10 years, which includes a $16 million upgrade in a billing system, which has got a useful life or average life around 10 years. We also were asked to look at master planning costs, which are around 10 million that we've capitalised from a regulatory-based perspective. The ESC have asked us to look at that over the broader asset life, which we'll be doing as well. But we're relatively comfortable at this stage that the regulatory depreciation rates that we're charging are still under that 36-year period, and that we are still taking some risk on behalf of customers in relation to that. So we'll provide some further documentation in relation to that as well. Proposed OPEX, use of materiality threshold. It's an interesting one from our perspective. That's materiality hasn't sort of been a concern in previous price periods around the quantity or the number of immaterial step changes. For us, as Chris said, we had a number of what the ESC term non-material. I think 0.5% of our total expenditure, but taken together, they're about 3.94 million, or 20% of our total OPEX. So, we think fundamentally that we can't probably absorb those costs going forward. We've had fairly stable operating costs per connection across the and now 9-year period. So we're probably not achieving those economies of scale that we can absorb in our baseline. So we'll look at how we, there's a couple of key ones there, particularly around chemicals, chemical costs that we have now under a contract that we know prices have increased, particularly for alum, and the quantities that for activated carbon that are lining up with our demand profile as well. And the other one was water sampling. So new compliance driver driven by the requirement to be more proactive in sampling particular chemicals in the water supply like pH and geosmin that are more of those longer term impacts rather than complaint driven. So we're moving from a complaint driven water quality sampling regime to a more proactive regime, which requires us to sample more frequently. So so our submission will respond to some of those needs. So thanks, Joe.
And I'll just finish off on the last slide if I can, Oscar. And that is just to bring us back to why we're all here. And that's the, what the commitments that we're making to our local community. And here on the screen are our 5 customer commitments. And these were developed from the insights that we gained from thousands of customers who contributed to those. And under each one of these commitments, there are a range of actions that we're going to take. There's some targets and some measures and some targets. And I'd really encourage you to have a look at those. And I'll just give you 2 examples. Under fair prices, for example, we're going to be implementing our customer care fair practice plan, doubling the customer hardship funding, and implementing our safety by design program. Under sustainable practices, there are many commitments, including upgrading wastewater treatment plants in Bright, Rutherglen, Beechworth and Benalla, as well as emissions reduction strategies, including through wind, solar, biogas, biochar and carbon sequestration. There's lots of actions that we're committing to in this price period. I'd like to say thank you once again and pass back to the ESC.
Good evening, everyone. Now is the opportunity to hear from customers and stakeholders. So there is a Q&A function if you don't want to talk, but online you are also more than welcome to put your virtual hand up and introduce yourself and ask a question. The questions can be directed either to the ESC or to North East Water. And we welcome all questions today. I know that some people feel a little bit nervous to ask questions in public, and as Jared has already articulated, there are plenty of other alternate options for you to share your feedback if you prefer. I can see we have our first person online. TD, would you mind unmuting yourself, introducing yourself and asking your question?
Good evening, and thank you, ESC, for the opportunity to at least offer a statement, perhaps on a question for the forum tonight. My name's Trent Dean. I'm the appointed CEO of Gateway Health, which is a not-for-profit registered community health organisation providing primary healthcare services across northern eastern Victoria and southern New South Wales. What I wanted to acknowledge and commend the quality of engagement that's been undertaken by the board, management and staff of North East Water. From Gateway Health's perspective, this has been genuine, what I consider genuinely inclusive and a well-considered process. And the workshops we're involved with, the direct conversations, really to us demonstrated a willingness, a genuine willingness to engage with a service provider like us who do work with the vulnerable communities and people within our region. And importantly, we've seen that input reflected in the pricing submission made by North East Water. And from where we sit, the North East Water regulatory pricing submission is highly relevant of the communities in which we serve. Access to safe, reliable, affordable water is not simply a utility issue. It is absolutely a health issue, and it impacts hygiene, nutrition, chronic disease management, and overall our community's well-being. So notwithstanding the anticipated price rises in inflation that you've already discussed this evening, we remain absolutely encouraged by North East Water's strong focus on fairness and equity. And those measures mentioned around increased hardship support, tariff changes that better reflect the realities of tenants and larger households, but importantly, that clear commitment to accessible and responsive customer care are not abstract policy settings for us. We believe they will make a tangible difference for people experiencing financial hardship and those at greater risk for poor health outcomes. But we do also welcome that emphasis that's been discussed on the reliability and long-term planning, particularly investment to support housing growth alongside that commitment to sustainability and working with the traditional owners on the lands in which we live, work and play, which we do believe are also critical to supporting a healthy and resilient community well into the future. So importantly, and very importantly, we want to draw out that we don't see this as a one-off engagement, but as an ongoing partnership. And our Gateway Health team is very keen to remain involved as these initiatives are implemented by North East Water. We want to continue to share the insights we have from our communities and the individuals we work with and indeed advocate for, because importantly, we believe this is more than just about service delivery. It's about improving the social determinants of health and ensuring that people in our region have the opportunity to live well. Thank you.
Brent, thank you so much for those comments. I'm sure that North East Water really appreciates the support and engagement from stakeholders like your organisation. T.I., sorry, I can't see your full name. Would you mind coming on and introducing yourself?
Sure. Trevor Ireno, I'm the CEO of Indigo Shire Council. Can I too also acknowledge the work of Jo Murdoch and her team, and I've observed her efforts for engagement with the various stakeholders quite intensely for the last number of years on this pricing submission, so if I can acknowledge and congratulate her and her staff. Indigo Shire is a small shire south of Wodonga. We are a series of small towns, and none of her staff will be surprised to hear me talk about, our desire to provide for growth in our smaller communities, and I guess acknowledging that as a corporation that needs to stand alone and survive in a financial sense, there is a temptation for North East Water to bias its long-term capital spend on the bigger cities because they get better bang for their buck. In terms of lower cost of new connections in the cities versus the smaller towns, the smaller shires. Notwithstanding that, all of the shires have their own housing targets that the state government has set, and we need to try and hit our own housing targets. And we also always need to be on the radar for North East Water to make sure that they're investing in the smaller shires. So I support their submission. I probably am a little concerned that not all of their operating costs have been that they said they needed are going to be supported. So I guess I'm concerned longer term that if North East Water is forced to lower their costs, and if they are unable to do that, then the bias will be down the track to I guess support the higher yielding regional city type investments rather than having the money they need to invest in the smaller councils, smaller shires, and growth in those small towns. So I'll just make that comment and that observation, and hope that that the EEC will take that in regard in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. We'll definitely take that into account and appreciate the commentary and the points of view. I have a hand up in the room. John is going to bring a microphone to you. If you could introduce yourself and let us know where you're from.
Very good segue. My name's Peter Tolsher. I'm the Mayor of Tauranga Shire Council, another small municipality within our region. Firstly, I've got to take this opportunity to speak. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Tauranga Shire, and also acknowledge the amount of work that Joe and the team, John, Nick over there, have done with this ESC report. For those who, sorry, is it working? It's just feedback. For those who don't know the area, Townlock Shire is located east of Wodonga and the three main townships of Corryong, Tallangatta and Bellbridge. The state government housing target for our municipality is 550 homes by 2051. Our greatest opportunity to achieve these targets is our townships of Tallangatta and Bellbridge. Tallangatta currently has a population of 1,100 people with about 600 homes. Over the past 20 years, there's been little residential development in Tallangatta. I live there, so I should know. It's been known for many years that future residential growth in Tallangatta was dependent on the development of a large parcel of land within the township boundary in the east of town. In around 2016-17, the sewer district of North East Water sort of expanded and incorporated this land. And we're quite concerned, even though this has been known for some time, on the page, for at least 10 years, the land was zoned residential and would be developed. The Tallangatta wastewater retic system currently has the capacity of only 29 original allotments. In 2025, Council issued a planning permit for 150 lot subdivision. Tallangatta East is where it is, and JMP are the developers. Council was advised in September 2025 that the price submission would be inclusive of the $2 million upgrade of the clear water storage, which it badly needs, and 750 allocated for capital works to support the Tallangatta State residential development. We note that the pricing submission includes $3 million for the clear water storage now, but that's the $750K for the allocation of the underground assets and pump systems doesn't seem to be there. The Tallangatta Wastewater Network Infrastructure Plan July 2024 shows 3 options for necessary network infrastructure augmentation, and the report recommends option 3 in order of $2.5 million to commence in 2028. As a community, we're deeply concerned that this has been omitted from the capital budget and price submission for the next 5 years, and this will be diabolical consequences for Tallangatta's growth and Council's ability to meet the housing target. So we seek the inclusion of the adequate allocation of funding in the price submission to ensure Tallangatta has adequate capacity for growth over the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. I will direct that to Joe.
Thank you, Mayor Tolsha, for that comment and the submission and your question. I can assure you that the $750,000 is in the capital program. It's not in the top 10 items of the capital program, but I've been informed that it is within the budget for the Tallangatta wastewater augmentation work, so a new rising main.
We've got a couple of hands in the room. If you could, John, if there's a lady in the front here, please.
Hi, sorry, Jenny Stern from JMP Developments. We are the developer who asked before. Our question is probably regarding the same item. It's the statement that is made in the response from North East Water relative to all assets required to service immediate recognised growth are funded. Now, I know it was noted then that $750,000 has been funded. But under the guidance notes from the essential services of North East Water, it clearly stipulates under the new customer guidance and framework documentation how individual assets should be treated. If they are categorised as shared assets or assets that are growth related and they're going to be used for future developments like a full growth corridor, once they are classified as a growth asset, shared asset, they are to be funded accordingly. And that's fully within the NCC framework funding mechanism. But at the moment, it appears the $750,000 that's allocated, being allocated, it's not going to fund the necessary infrastructure to provide the sewer rising main to support the growth, which this asset will do. It will support 600 lots within the entire growth corridor. So we're quite interested in understanding why the full 2.5 million that was clearly articulated in the infrastructure plan of the Stantec report is not being fully funded.
Thanks, Jenny. I just want to clarify that 750,000 is for what I understand is the upsizing of the new rising main. I do have Tim Gollan and Guy Wilson-Brown here. I'm just wondering if one of you might like to come up and just respond to Jenny's comment. Thanks, Tim. Tim Gollan is our Manager of Urban Growth.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, Tim Gollan, everybody. So in answer to, I think we had a question about the clear water storage as well, which I think we've hopefully got that one squared away because that's not growth related. So we're good with that one. The full cost of the rising main that's required to service the full development in Tallangatta isn't yet known. That work hasn't been done. What we've done is put a contribution to what we suspect will be the upsizing for that sewer rising main. So like many greenfield growth areas, there's an element of developer delivered infrastructure that's required for that to go ahead. At the moment, that's where we see the Tallangatta estate infrastructure requirement being developer driven. If that's to change through some negotiated arrangement, that can change. But at the moment, that's how we're approaching the development in Tallangatta.
Sorry, I just wanted to respond to that because your new customer contribution explanatory notes are very, very clear how an increased capacity shared asset is funded. And it even has a section beyond that, which refers you to further information within your final decision, regional urban water business final decision, which clearly stipulates that part of the asset being the developer, because it's whoever has triggered the asset, which is us. We need to look at the benefit, what the asset is actually doing and why it's there. The details of how much the asset is costing is in the Stantec report, which clearly itemises each individual asset and how much it's costing. So I don't understand how $750,000 has been arrived at when it clearly stipulates how much the asset is the cost of the asset. And on top of that, us being the first developer, we pay for our component under NCC, and then the rest of it goes into the regulatory asset base. And as all the other developers connect in through the whole growth corridor, which is 600, then it is taken off and it moves throughout the process.
Thanks for your comments and thanks for the short but probably less than satisfactory explanation on the fly. We're not here today to discuss specific projects and the NCC negotiations that are necessary between a developer and the water business. So I acknowledge your dissatisfaction with where we're at right now, and I encourage Joe and the team to reach out to you and discuss further. What you will see from our work on new customer contributions is that we did not accept North East Water's current position, and that they have been doing a lot of work between a draft and final, which we have not seen yet. What our final decision is required to do is either accept or reject their standard charges and their negotiating framework. And if you're not satisfied with the standard charges, then I strongly encourage you to work on a negotiated position with North East Water. Gentleman at the back.
Hi, my name is Stephen Swart. I'm the Director of Sustainability and Culture at the Rural City of Wangaratta, and I'd like to speak in support of North East Water's price submission. The Rural City of Wangaratta is a growing community with a population of around 30,000 at the moment. Wangaratta is a major commercial and manufacturing centre, well poised for significant further growth, and providing a wide range of services and facilities to populations well beyond our boundary. Rural City of Wangaratta's economy is supported by a diverse range of industry, including significant manufacturing, healthcare, and a growing tourism industry. And the area supports more than 14,000 jobs and generates more than $5 billion in economic output every year. Wangaratta currently has around 10,000 homes with opportunities for continued and significant residential growth. And the Victorian government identified the city as a priority growth location with a housing target of an additional 6,000 dwellings by 2051. My understanding is that while the existing Wangaratta drinking water and wastewater networks have sufficient capacity to meet current demand, infrastructure in both networks is approaching or already operating beyond its original design capacity. Over the next 50 years, the number of homes in Wangaratta is expected to increase by around 15,000 new houses. Without significant investment in new and upgraded water and sewage infrastructure, this growth cannot be accommodated. Only a few years ago, Wangaratta found itself in a situation where major strategic residential growth areas could not be serviced due to capacity constraints within the sewage network. This significantly delayed residential development and created pressure in the local residential market. North East Water worked closely with council to find short-term solutions to this issue, and development of these growth areas are underway, providing much-needed housing. However, timely and sustained future investment now needs to be secured to ensure this sort of capacity issue does not occur again. The Rural City of Wangaratta has been working with our community and authorities to ensure strategic plans for future growth are in place. We also continue to work with North East Water to ensure plans are in place to provide the foundation for such growth, water and sewage infrastructure. These plans will require investment to bring them to life. I would also like to thank North East Water for their transparent approach in developing the pricing submission and for the opportunities to work together to secure the essential investment to enable our long-term growth aspirations. I recognize that while the proposed price increases may be challenging for some, they are fundamental to underpinning the infrastructure investments required to support Wangaratta's long-term growth and economic development objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take that as a comment. And John, a hand over the other side of the room.
Thank you, John. My name is Matthew Salmon. I'm a development consultant in North East Survey Design, predominantly in the Wangaratta, Yarrawonga, Benalla, sort of the southern part of the area. I too would like to acknowledge the engagement through Jo and her team. I think we've been to many different development forums, and consistently over the last 2 years, it's been really a great process. And I think that's been evident through the way it has been assessed. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I think the development community here and North East Water have actually worked quite well together in developing those master plans. I think it was crucial to identify, we're looking at a 5-year sort of pricing submission here, but realistically it needs to be looked at over a 20-year period, because obviously the infrastructure is spread over that time and different areas. So I think that master planning is really crucial. Obviously, if we had a massive bucket of money, we'd want to get it all done right now, but that's, that's the reality of life. So, but I think they've done a good job. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that from a development perspective, we feel listened and heard. And I think that probably leads into the my main point, which is the consistent region-wide method of calculating NCCs. So I would actually say that is probably, to me, one of the most important aspects of what we're doing here, and hence the engagement that North East Water, this was direct feedback from the development community and how we actually develop land in this region. We are different. Regions are different to the cities. And I think it's really important to understand that over the last 20 years that I've been working here, the different towns have all been systematically upgraded. For example, the Yarrawonga treatment plant has been upgraded recently. The Bright water storage has been upgraded recently. The other towns that are in the region have been paying NCCs for that infrastructure. So if you change the model now, it's actually not a fair distribution of cost. That makes sense. Because under the current model, Yarrawonga would be zero NCCs because they've got no investment because they don't need it. They've already had it. Same with Bright. Wangaratta, on the other hand, for example, as Stephen pointed out, we had a real crisis there where we had no development capacity. North East Water, together with us as development consultants, and all come up with strategies and solutions and worked really hard to have some short-term to medium-term solutions that cost money. To impose that cost on Wangaratta as a location-based NCC is not a fair and equitable distribution of cost. So when we met last week with, I think it was 15 or 20 developers in the room, I think from a regional development perspective, where we all try to achieve affordable housing and housing targets, the best model is a master planned approach where each town gets their turn based on growth, and then we try and work together to actually have sustained growth across a region. If you put NCCs at 17, 18,000 in Wodonga, you're going to stunt growth here. It's going to push it somewhere else. That's the nature of how development works. So I think if you listen to all the development community here in regions, we need a fair distribution of costs across the whole area, and then everyone can work together to achieve those housing outcomes. So I implore you to really reconsider that matter, and I'll be happy to have further discussions along those lines because I've driven an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half to get here to talk to this. So I feel very passionate about it. And yeah, so anyway, I'll close on that matter. And thanks very much for the opportunity to talk. And as I said, I will be putting in a written submission as well with my details so that we can have further discussions because it's actually crucial.
Thank you, and really appreciate the time that you have taken today to come and share that message with us. We have heard that North East Water has been doing a lot of work to progress their NCC approach. We have not seen that yet, so I won't make any comment, but I absolutely acknowledge the position that has been put forward by the developer community, and we will certainly take that into regard. And we look forward to written submissions and further engagement as necessary. Thank you. Any other hands online or in the room? Yeah, sure.
Sorry, just following on from what Matt said, we also support North East Water's decision to move away from location-based NCCs to a more uniform, and that's exactly what everyone else has mentioned earlier. But another thing to keep in mind is that, like Matt said, a lot of these areas have been cross-subsidising them. Like, for instance, in Tangambalanga, we've been paying standard NCCs for quite some time, and with not as much, well, very little investment in the area. And obviously in this pricing period, investment is required, and we would be cross-subsidising. We've cross-subsidised and we'll be paying an extremely higher amount. The other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of those regional areas, they do provide more affordable housing for people that isn't necessarily achieved in the larger areas such as Wodonga or, Wangaratta. And the rate per square metre that developers or, can sell them for are a lot less, larger lots, but you'd be still paying a higher amount, which would eventually just go straight to the end user. So we fully support uniform standard NCC.
Thank you. Thanks for that. All right, we're closing to 7 o'clock, so I might give a last call. Don't think there's any hands left. So I will start to wrap up now. As I have said, and as everyone who's sat next to me has said, thank you very much for attending today. We know that many of you have engaged in this process not only today, but for the past 18 months. And as we have articulated, customers are absolutely central to the value proposition that North East Water puts forward. And we really need to hear from customers and stakeholders to understand the proposition that North East Water is putting forward. And between draft and final, all of your comments and submissions will be taken into account. Thank you for those who've travelled far and close. Safe travels to wherever you are going tonight. Thanks very much.